Hello again. I promise I'm not doing anything more today, but we did feel it was important to have more conversation around the current state of play in the Middle East, where it leaves that region, but also US policy, the role of America, and of course the ultimate goal of peace. Ambassador Thomas Nides, thank you very much for joining us. I know you're waiting to have your dinner in Washington, but we appreciate you hanging on for us. You've recently stepped down as ambassador, but I know you remain, particularly in light of recent events, very engaged in the region. So perhaps I should just start by asking you to give your brief take on where we are, where things will go in the next few days, or where they could go in the next few days and weeks.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me and my friends at Bloomberg, as well as you. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I had a little bit of a conflict. Let me just say, I say this without exaggeration. I think this could be and will be probably some of the toughest 30 days in Israel's history. This is what we're dealing with right now is something that Israel would never have thought could happen to them. What Hamas did to Israel on October 7th was as bad as the worst day of the Holocaust. The inability for them to defend themselves, but most importantly, the brutality of which Hamas did will forever be scarred in the minds of Israelis. I'd like to remind people it would be as if 330 million Americans, the population of the United States around there, all lost a family member in the Twin Towers. That is what Israel is going through. The amount of complete sorrow and devastation and focus. It took Hamas to bring the country together. So what's happening now? Again, I think this next 30 days is going to be exceptionally critical to Israel. They're trying to do four things at the same time. All of them are kind of contradictions to each other a little bit. One, they have to rid the country of Hamas. They've got to rid Gaza of Hamas. It's got to be done for not only for the security of the state of Israel, but for the region and quite frankly for the United States. Number two, they've got to find these hostages. There's 240 hostages, little kids, mothers, fathers, grandmothers who are probably under these tunnels. They've got to figure out a way to get these hostages out. In fact, I met with hostage families this morning. It's devastating. Number three, they got to keep the Hezbollah out of this. Having a two-front war is very complicated, and I think President Biden's moving those ships into the Mediterranean certainly was a helpful sign and signal to Iran, don't screw with us. That's a diplomatic term, by the way. And fourth, and I think is really important, we should not lose sight of this, we've got to protect innocent lives. These Palestinian photos we're seeing, it's devastating. And I think this fight is not with the Palestinian people. This fight is with Hamas. And it breaks my heart to see these innocent kids and mothers and fathers get killed. And Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. And this is their words. The more Palestinians that die is better for their cause, because their cause is to basically destroy the state of Israel. And they'll say this is about martyrism. So I say this is a devastating time for the Palestinians, for Israelis. Of what's happened here. Hamas knows what they're up to. They're trying to create chaos, and they've done a good job of that, by the way, and they're trying to create a regional war. So Israel has got a very, very tough road here in the next 30 days and beyond, but something obviously I've spent a lot of time on and worry about all my friends and family that are being hurt and will continue to be suffering.
Israel and the US have ruled out a ceasefire for now. But Israel has also resisted even US calls for humanitarian pauses that we heard from the Secretary of State when he was in the region. Why is that not viable for Israel right now?
Well, I think on the ceasefire, I think it's clear we can't do a ceasefire because then Hamas wins, and ceasefires would cause enormous irreparable damage to the state of Israel and to the region. America has a lot of assets in the Middle East as well. It's not good for any of our friends. It's not good for the Saudis, the Emiratis. We got to Hamas is a cancer that has to be dealt with. I am very much supportive of a pause to help on humanitarian stuff. We need to do a better job. There needs to be more caravans of trucks coming from Egypt on the Rafah Gate, crossing to go to southern Gaza. It's improved. It's not enough. We've got to make sure those people aren't suffering. And my assumption is that Israel will soon understand the importance of doing a pause and making sure that the humanitarian efforts are done, especially as it relates to the hostages. So I just like the president and many people believe a pause is necessary. And my assumption is working with the Israelis, that will happen sooner than later.
If you think about the big fears, there's a fear that we're seeing unfold in terms of the humanitarian consequences in Gaza. But looking ahead, people have been most concerned, as you mentioned, about a broader war, broadening of the war. But also, frankly, a fear that there is no plan on the Israeli side. And I know the US have been speaking to Israel about that. What is the plan for Gaza after the conflict ends, or at least if we reach that ceasefire point? And what's the US role in that?
Well, it's a very good question. And again, I don't blame Israel their plan today is to rid Hamas and to get those hostages out and to stop a northern front war. That's their goals. That's what they have to be focused on. The day after is very important. I know a lot of people are thinking about the day after. The day after cannot be Israel occupying Gaza for the long term, that's for sure. And it's going to have to be a regional, it's going to have to be the Egyptians, the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Qataris. We're going to need to have a full-fledged unified vision of what's going to look like in Gaza. Could be some of the PA. Listen, all of this has to be debated and conversations have to be taking place. I know Secretary Blinken's been in the region talking to all of our allies in the region. We're all in this together, folks. I mean, we got to get rid of Hamas. We're going to have to rebuild Gaza. We're going to have to take care of the Palestinians who have suffered. There's going to be work for a lot of people to do. Then ultimately, we have to think about, what comes next. And obviously, that's something that I've spent a lot of time and energy on. Prior to this, as you know, I was a big supporter of Saudi normalization because that was going to be the key to make this a safer region. And more importantly, also to do something for the Palestinian people, which would be part of that. I'm not giving up hope on that. And I know you spoke to the Saudis earlier today. I'm very much focused, and quite frankly, I think it's more important than ever. And I know that President Biden shares that view, and hopefully we can get that back on track. Because at the end of the day, we need to have a two-state solution for the Palestinians. We need to have normalization with Saudi Arabia, that being Israel. It makes it a safer place for the United States and for the region as well.
You mentioned what the US policy and indeed Israeli policy in the last few years has been to sideline the Palestinians in effect, but use these regional agreements, whether it's the Abraham Accords or potentially the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, as the path to a more peaceful region. But I mean, that's failed, right?
Well, listen, obviously the previous administration, and I gave the Trump administration lots of credit for the Abraham Accords. I was a big advocate. Obviously, I wasn't part of that administration, but the normalization with Bahrain and Morocco and the UAE was exceptionally helpful, and I think it made the region safer. And quite frankly, it's actually in sort of way been helpful during this conflict as it is today. So I'm a big supporter of those normalization. Yes, you are 100% right. The Palestinians weren't part of that. And I think that, in retrospect, is a mistake. The President Biden has articulated many times that we need to have a vision and an opportunity to get a two-state solution together. And that is why I felt for the longest time the Saudi piece of this is a very important part of this. Again, it's not the only thing, but it's a big part of the long-term security for the region. And they're a big player, a very important player. And I think we got to make sure we're focused on that as we see the next, the months unfold. But you are right. Your question's right. The Palestinians, are not perfect either, to be clear, in the West Bank. But they want the same thing all of us want. They want to live in peace and opportunity. And again, this fight is not with the Palestinian people. I spent, as American ambassador, I probably spent more time on the Palestinian issue than I probably should have. But I felt strongly that if you're going to have a safe Israel, you need to have a real focus on the future of the Palestinian people. And I believe that in my heart today.
Just briefly, how do you read Iran's stance at the moment? Because I think there's at least been some who've been cautiously drawing optimistic conclusions from the relative restraint of the Iranians so far. But do you think that's illusory?
Listen, I know I don't trust the Iranians, so let's not get carried away here. But listen, I think regardless if you like Joe Biden or hate Joe Biden, Joe Biden says superpowers don't bluff. When those big, huge Navy ships moved into the Mediterranean with lots of airplanes on them, I think the Iranians got a clear sense that we weren't screwing around on this, that they need to stay out of this. They need to make sure that that Hezbollah, which is obviously their proxy, doesn't get engaged. You can't sleep on this. This is a very tense moment and tense time for Israel and for the United States. But yes, I think for the time, at least as of tonight, I think we have got Israel's back vis-a-vis the idea of a two-front war.
Just broadening out a bit, because we're obviously thinking about the global context here as well as events in the Middle East. This is just one of several conflicts. We obviously have Ukraine, grinding conflicts in Syria and Yemen. And in each of those, you have challenges to the US in one way or another from a collection of players, but often proxies of Russia and Iran. There are a number of commentators who look at that and see, indeed we heard it from the foreign minister of Singapore earlier, who look at those simmering tensions somewhat connected and say they fear that we see the sort of precursor to something as we saw in the just before World War I. Do you have that concern when you look at how this increasing number of wars are brewing and all of them challenges to the US?
Listen, America is America, and we have to, walk and chew gum at the same time. It's clear that the Ukraine-Russia thing is exceptionally important, and under a lot of leadership, we organized NATO to do something they haven't done since World War II, which is organize around making sure that Russia didn't do and continues to expand their abilities to cause havoc within Ukraine. I think ultimately, America and Europe are working on these issues collectively together. I'm not one of these people who is panicked. Clearly, America's not only their ability to use our means, but our ability to use diplomacy in a very important fashion, which I think that this administration is doing effectively to try to send messages to not only to our allies that we're with them, but also those who want to do harm to the United States and the rest of the world, that we're focused on it. So, listen, again, obviously, we live in a very complex world. I'm sure the next 2 days there, better than most. There's a lot of things, a lot of plates spinning at the same time. We got to deal with each plate at its time and focus on getting the right things done and the right leadership and sending the right messages.
Is Prime Minister Netanyahu done politically? How long can he remain in power, do you think?
I don't comment on Israel politics. Well, I would, but I can't do it right now. Listen, there's going to be a reckoning here. There's one thing about Israelis and Jews and many of us. There will be a lot of self-reflection here. This is and was a catastrophic moment for the state of Israel, probably as big as the creation of the state in 1948, 75 years ago. This is on their 75th anniversary this happened. And I assure you one thing, I just watched Golda, the movie that came out about the Yom Kippur War. I watched it last night. And as you recall, after that, what happened in the Yom Kippur War, there was a lot of examination of what happened. This, I believe, is much worse than even of that, because that was done by countries. This is done by a handful of terrorists. So there's going to be lots of recriminations and self-examination. So ultimately, the Israeli people will have to decide who their leadership is. We can't determine who it will be. But I am confident that the Israeli government and the and the Israeli people will look at what happened, examine it, and figure out who's held responsible, and more importantly, what changes they need to make so this doesn't happen again.
Final question. I mean, the US has obviously been enormously visible, and particularly Secretary of State Blinken, in responding to this crisis and being in the region, though it has often felt like the US is not being listened to by either side, by Arab nations or by being lectured by Arab nations and not necessarily being listened to by Israel. Jack Lew has been confirmed a week ago as your successor as ambassador. He's there in the region now. You just told me he arrived a few days ago. What's your advice to him? How can you get people to listen to the US and end up on a better path?
Well, let's be clear. They listen to us. Let's make no mistake. I mean, I don't, one of the ministers when I was there made some crack to me when I was pushing back on the judicial reform, made some crack about, stay out of our business. And I responded, you really want America to stay out of your business? Really? And it's more true now than ever. Listen, there's no question. The United States is the indispensable ally to Israel. Everyone knows it. The region knows it. Certainly Iran knows it. Hezbollah knows it. Listen, if you look around the region, you ask the Emiratis and the Qataris and the Kuwaitis and the Saudis, their relationship with the United States and how important that is, it's important. And, we don't have to be a bully, but we make no mistake. These bilateral relationships are important to the United States for its security and for their security. So I'm very confident people are listening to us. And there's conversations you have in public, there's conversations you have in private. So I assure you, as we look at the future of the Middle East, the United States will play a material role in the security of the region and for our allies and for our own American interests as well.
Tom Nides, Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
I'm honored. Thank you.